The west corridor camera light was off. It should never be off during a family movement window. I stopped, reading the maintenance log again. No entry, no alert. A child's shoe sat beneath the console, placed carefully, not dropped. I waited, listening to the hum behind the walls. Protocol said continue the sweep. Instinct said something had already been moved. I stayed still, watching the dark lens, unsure who wanted it blind. The briefing room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. The royal guard took his seat without comment, folding his gloves across his knee as the monitors along the wall came to life. No names were displayed, only timestamps and corridor identifiers. That omission alone told him the tone had shifted. The duty officer spoke evenly, reading from a prepared card rather than the usual tablet. Effective immediately, all movement windows involving junior members are subject to discretionary oversight. Verbal confirmation replaces written clearance. No deviations are to be logged unless instructed. The guard noted the phrasing. Discretionary oversight was not a standard term. Neither was the instruction to withhold logs. He did not look up, but he felt the pause ripple across the room as others processed the same detail. No one asked a question. They never did in rooms like this. After dismissal, the corridors seemed narrower. The lights were set 1 degree lower, a barely perceptible dim that softened the marble's reflection. The guard adjusted his pace to match the new patrol rhythm uploaded to his wrist unit. Routes had been altered overnight, shortened in some places, oddly elongated in others. The changes favored privacy over visibility. At the western stair junction, he passed a senior aide moving quickly, shoes quiet on stone. The aide avoided eye contact, clutched a slim folder without markings. The guard registered the folder's thickness. Reports traveled digitally now. Paper meant containment. By midday, word filtered through the ranks without words. Princess Anne had requested a private security review. That alone was not unusual. What followed was. The review was sealed, its circulation restricted to a list that did not include operational guards. Orders were flowing downward without context. During the afternoon sweep, the guard paused near the family wing access point. The temperature here was cooler than the rest of the floor, the HVAC overcompensating as if the space had been sealed too long. He checked the wall sensor. No fault reported. A junior logistics officer approached, voice low. "Routes are being reassigned again tonight," she said, eyes fixed on the badge scanner. "You may be moved off the east wing." "Reason?" the guard asked. She shook her head once. "Above my clearance." When she left, the guard stood still longer than necessary, listening to the building. The palace had a sound when it was functioning normally, a layered quiet of distant steps, air cycling, muted doors. Today, that sound felt edited, as if someone had removed a track. Near evening, a message appeared on his unit: maintain presence, observe only. Escalation requires authorization. No sender listed. He followed the revised route past the private study where Princess Anne had spent the morning. The door was closed now, but the brass handle showed a fresh polish, recently handled, recently cleaned. Through the narrow gap beneath the door, a strip of light cut across the carpet. Inside, voices murmured, measured, controlled. He caught no words. Further down the corridor, a child's drawing had been removed from the notice alcove. The space where it had hung was lighter than the surrounding wood, a clean rectangle left behind. The guard remembered the drawing, a crude sketch of a horse, colored heavily in blue. He had seen the child stand on tiptoe to pin it there days ago. He stopped, hand resting lightly against the wall. The instruction was clear: observe only. But observation required memory, and memory required comparison. Something had been reviewed, something had been contained, and now the building itself was being taught to forget. He resumed his patrol, slower now, eyes tracking details that had not mattered yesterday. The palace remained calm, orderly, obedient. That, he realized, was what unsettled him most. The evening transition began without ceremony. Lights shifted to their night profile, warmer tones along the main corridors, cooler along service routes. The guard adjusted automatically, letting his eyes recalibrate as he moved. His earpiece remained silent. Silence, he had learned, was often intentional. At 1900 hours, a sealed directive arrived on his wrist unit. No subject line, no originating office. Only a short instruction: stand by for discretionary tasking. Remain mobile. Do not initiate inquiry. He acknowledged receipt without comment. Inquiry was not his role. Protection was. The difference between the two had always been thin, but tonight it felt deliberate. Faintly blurred. As he passed the east wing threshold, he noticed the scent first. Cleaning solvent, stronger than the morning's disinfectant, sharp enough to sting the back of the throat. Someone had sanitized recently, thoroughly. The floors reflected light too evenly, as if scrubbed with care rather than speed. This was not routine turnover. This was erasure. He paused at the corner where the child usually turned toward the inner garden. The turn had been removed from the route plan. His unit displayed a straight line now, directing him past without deviation. He stood anyway, counting breaths, listening. Footsteps approached from behind, measured, unhurried. He did not turn until they stopped. "Officer," a voice said, senior, composed, the head of household security, "you're off pattern." "Yes, sir," the guard replied. He did not step away. The man glanced at the wall sensor, then at the guard's wrist unit. "We're minimizing presence here tonight." "Understood," the guard said. A pause. The head of security lowered his voice. "There's heightened sensitivity around certain matters. You are to maintain distance." "From whom?" the guard asked, carefully neutral. The man's expression did not change. "From conclusions." The answer was precise enough to be unhelpful. The guard nodded once and stepped back into the assigned path. As he moved away, he felt the weight of being watched until the corner turned. Later in the lower archive corridor, he encountered the logistics officer again. She was standing by a locked cabinet, hands clasped behind her back. The cabinet bore a temporary seal, red strip, fresh adhesive. "Long day," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. She hesitated, then spoke without looking at him. "Some files were misclassified. They're being corrected." "Misclassified how?" he asked. "As incomplete," she said. "They're being marked as resolved." He absorbed that. Resolution without process was a familiar tactic. It closed doors quietly. Near the service stairwell, he heard a child's voice, not speaking, humming, soft, uneven. The sound drifted briefly, then stopped. His unit did not register a proximity alert. The sound had come from a space no longer mapped for him. He slowed, letting distance close naturally. The stairwell door was shut. A guard he did not recognize stood nearby, posture rigid, eyes fixed forward. New assignment, he noted. New loyalty. "Everything all right?" the guard asked, standard phrasing. "Yes," the other guard replied, too quickly. The guard moved on. He did not look back. Looking back would have been noted. By the time his shift ended, the palace had settled into a deeper quiet. Logs were complete, clean, unremarkable. On paper, nothing had occurred. In the locker room, he removed his gloves and examined his hands. A faint smear of blue marked one fingertip. He did not remember touching ink. He washed it off slowly, watching the color dissolve down the drain. As he left, his unit vibrated once more. A final message flagged low priority, further guidance pending. Maintain readiness. He stepped into the night air, cooler than the corridors, less controlled. Somewhere inside the palace, a report had been read, and the consequences were unfolding without announcement. He understood then that this chapter was not about what the report contained. It was about who was being protected from it. The palace adjusted before dawn. It always did. Heating shifted first, then lighting, then access permissions. The guard felt the change as he entered through the staff gate, warm air pressing slightly heavier against his face, as if the building had sealed itself overnight. His wrist unit synced without delay. New route, new priority markers, no explanation. The corridor assigned to him ran parallel to the family wing but never touched it. A buffer path, designed for presence without proximity. He followed it at regulation pace, boots silent against stone polished to remove sound. The walls here absorbed light rather than reflected it. The effect was intentional. Silence was easier to enforce in places like this. At the first junction, he noticed the absence before the detail. The camera housing above the archway was intact, lens clean, power indicator dark, not flickering, not damaged, simply off. He stopped beneath it, counting seconds. 5, 10. No alert, no vibration from his unit. The system believed the camera was active. He logged the position mentally and moved on. Logging it officially would require justification. Justification required authorization. Authorization was no longer predictable. Further along, a maintenance trolley stood parked against protocol, partially blocking the alcove that once held a fire access panel. The panel itself was sealed, inspection tag dated that morning. Too early for routine checks. He brushed his fingers lightly along the trolley handle as he passed, still warm. The corridor curved gently left, leading toward the Western Service intersection. Thigh. S was where traffic usually crossed, a low-level hum of staff movement, carts, murmured exchanges. Today it was empty. The absence felt staged. He slowed, letting his pace fall just short of suspicious. The soundscape narrowed. His own breathing seemed louder than it should have been. At the intersection, the access reader blinked green before he reached it. Pre-clearance. Someone had anticipated his arrival. Beyond the threshold, the temperature dropped sharply. The HVAC here had been throttled down. Cold, discouraged, lingering. He felt it through the soles of his boots. Halfway down the corridor, he saw the mark on the floor. It was faint, easily dismissed as a cleaning residue. A pale arc no longer than a child's step where polish had not fully blended. He knelt as if adjusting his boot, studying the surface. The arc curved inward toward a side passage no longer marked on his route. He stood slowly. The side passage door was closed, unlabeled. Its handle showed recent contact, oils not yet dulled by air. He did not touch it. Touching would change things. His earpiece clicked once. Not a call, a channel shift. Someone was listening. He resumed movement, passing the door without turning his head. The discipline required effort. Instinct pressed hard now, urging alignment between what he felt and what he did. At the far end of the corridor, a junior supervisor waited, posture deliberately casual. "You're ahead of schedule," the supervisor said. "Yes," the guard replied. The supervisor smiled thinly. "That won't be necessary going forward. We're tightening timing." "Understood." The supervisor stepped aside, blocking the view back down the corridor for a moment longer than required. When the guard passed, he felt the corridor behind him close, not physically but administratively. Access rewritten in real time. By mid-morning, 2 more cameras along his route went dark, always clean, always unremarked. He began counting them. By afternoon, the silence was no longer neutral. It had shape, direction. It moved away from certain doors, certain turns, funneling presence elsewhere. And somewhere within that silence, something was being kept from him on purpose. By late afternoon, the guard no longer trusted the rhythm of his own patrol. The palace had altered it subtly, shortening pauses, extending sightlines that revealed nothing of consequence, compressing time where attention might wander. His wrist unit updated twice without vibration. Silent revisions. He adjusted anyway, building a parallel map in his head. What he had been allowed to see versus what he remembered from weeks before. The difference between the two widened with every turn. Near the service elevators, he encountered resistance for the first time. Two guards stood at a junction that normally required one. Both were senior enough to ask questions. Neither did. "Routes closed," one said, voice neutral. "Temporarily?" the guard asked. "Indefinitely." No explanation followed. The word was meant to end the exchange. The guard acknowledged and redirected, noting the time. That corridor led toward the inner rooms used during private tutoring hours. Closing it meant something had shifted earlier than planned. He took the long way around, passing storage rooms and ventilation grates that carried sound better than intended. Through one grate, he heard movement above, light steps, irregular spacing. Not staff. Staff moved with purpose. This was hesitant. He slowed, aligning his pace with the sound. The steps stopped. He stopped. A pause stretched between them, thin as wire. His unit vibrated once. A warning flag, low priority. Maintain assigned path. He continued. At the northern bend, he found the toy. It was small, wooden, painted blue. A horse, worn smooth along the back. It lay just inside the shadow of a column, placed carefully rather than dropped. He did not pick it up. He did not need to. He had seen it before, clutched tightly during escorted walks, thumb rubbing the chipped paint. The guard stood there longer than regulation allowed, body angled as if reviewing a panel. No one approached. The silence thickened, waiting. He moved on, leaving the toy where it was. Removing it would have signaled discovery. Leaving it signaled patience. Minutes later, he was intercepted again, this time by the head of household security himself. The man's presence carried weight without volume. "You're noticing patterns," the man said, not unkindly. "Yes, sir," the guard replied. "That's expected," the man continued. "But patterns can be misleading when context is restricted." "Is context being restricted?" the guard asked. A pause measured. "Context is being managed." They stood facing each other, the space between them neutral ground. The head of security lowered his voice. "There are considerations above both of us. You're being asked to trust the structure." The guard nodded once. "My role is to trust procedures." "And procedures are intact," the man said, though. His eyes flicked briefly toward the darker corridor behind them. When the man left, the guard felt the conversation settle like dust. Nothing had been said that could be challenged. Everything had been said that mattered. As evening approached, the palace shifted again. Family movement windows opened and closed without announcement. The guard was reassigned twice in under an hour, each time edging him farther from the inner rooms. On his final pass through the western intersection, he noticed the camera light flicker on, then off again. A test. Someone checking whether he was still watching. He stopped beneath it deliberately this time, raised his eyes, met the dark lens. Somewhere nearby, a child was being moved without record. Somewhere else, a report was being reduced to a conclusion that fit. The guard stood still, committing the moment to memory. Because memory, he understood now, was the only thing they had not yet found a way to reroute. The guard began the morning without consulting his wrist unit. He memorized the assigned route, then let it run in the background while his attention stayed elsewhere, on thresholds, on pauses, on the way people adjusted their steps when they thought no one important was watching. The palace was warmer today, not by much, enough to dull alertness. He recognized the tactic from overseas postings, comfort as compliance. Near the East Gallery, he observed the first deviation. A nanny exited early, carrying nothing. Too early for the child's scheduled movement, too empty-handed for someone finishing a routine. Her shoulders were set, posture disciplined, but her eyes scanned ahead as if anticipating correction. The guard slowed, letting distance close naturally. "Morning," he said, voice neutral. She nodded, "Morning." "You're off schedule." She hesitated, then recovered. "Instructions changed." "From whom?" She glanced down the corridor, then back at him. Household. It was not an answer, but it was all she would give. She moved on, pace tightening. He did not follow. Patterns required patience. Later, during the second sweep, he passed the inner garden doors. They were locked, not unusual in winter. What was unusual was the absence of condensation on the glass. The space beyond was warm, recently occupied. He noted the time, cross-referenced it mentally with the child's usual routine. The overlap was too precise to be coincidence. At midday, he encountered the tutor in a service corridor, carrying a folded schedule. Paper again. The tutor's hand shook slightly as she tucked it into her bag. "Is the afternoon session proceeding?" the guard asked. She paused. "No." "Cancelled." "Relocated." "To where?" She hesitated. "I wasn't told." The guard stepped aside to let her pass. As she did, the folded paper slipped partially free. He caught a glimpse of handwritten notes in blue ink, arrows, time blocks, a child's name crossed out and rewritten lower on the page. That evening, he reviewed his mental ledger. Camera outages clustered around specific corridors. Cleaning cycles coincided with altered movement windows. Staff reassigned away from predictable contact points. And always the same thing missing. The child did not appear where expected. No distress alerts, no formal absences, just absence. He adjusted his patrol to pass near the service stairwell again. This time the door was open a fraction, enough to leak sound. He slowed, letting the moment stretch. Inside, a soft rhythm, breathing, someone counting under their breath. He did not enter. Entry would escalate. Escalation required permission. Permission would be denied. Instead, he waited until the sound stopped, then moved on, marking the count. The child always counted when anxious. He had noticed it weeks ago, during a fire drill that never finished. That night in the locker room, he found the blue horse placed neatly on his bench. Clean, dry, returned. No note. He did not touch it immediately. He sat, removed his gloves, and waited. Whoever had placed it there wanted him to know something without saying it aloud. The pattern was no longer abstract. It had weight now, shape. And it pointed toward deliberate concealment, not protection. He wrapped the toy in a clean cloth and secured it in his locker, choosing memory over evidence. Because evidence could be erased. Patterns could not, unless someone stopped looking. The guard adjusted his approach after that. He stopped looking for presence and began looking for avoidance. Doors that closed too smoothly. Corridors reassigned just long enough to break routine. Adults who spoke in complete sentences but avoided nouns. By midweek, the palace schedule had become a shell. On paper, the child moved as expected, tutorials, meals, rest periods. In reality, those movements left no residue. No chair warmed twice. No carpet compressed. No incidental noise. The guard confirmed it during a late afternoon sweep. He paused outside the music room where the child usually practiced. The door was open. The room was empty. The piano lid was closed, dust undisturbed. Yet the bench had been adjusted recently, moved closer as the child preferred. Someone had prepared the room, knowing the child would not arrive. He stood there longer than necessary, listening. The palace responded with nothing. No correction, no inquiry. Silence was still permitted. Later, near the staff service corridor, he encountered the senior nanny again. She looked tired now. Not physically, professionally. The kind of fatigue that came from maintaining alignment with instructions that contradicted instinct. "Is the child unwell?" the guard asked, phrasing it as concern rather than suspicion. She hesitated long enough to matter. "No," she said, "not unwell." "Then absent by design." Her mouth tightened. "You should be careful," she said quietly. "Patterns can be interpreted as interference." He inclined his head. "So can omissions." She did not respond. When she walked away, her steps were uneven, as if she had forgotten her own rhythm. That evening, the guard reviewed what he could not write down. The counting. The toy returned without explanation. The careful redirection of adults away from specific rooms. The quiet pressure to accept reassurance without verification. He tested the system once carefully. At a minor junction, he delayed his patrol by 90 seconds, not enough to trigger escalation, just enough to create overlap. The child appeared briefly at the far end of the corridor, escorted by someone unfamiliar. Smaller frame, civilian posture, no insignia. The child's head was down, one hand clenched in the other's sleeve. The escort noticed the guard immediately and altered course, turning sharply into a side passage that should have been locked. The door opened without resistance. The guard did not follow. Following would have confirmed awareness. Awareness would have closed the last open spaces. Instead, he noted the escort's grip, too firm but controlled. He noted the absence of the blue horse. That night he opened his locker and removed the wrapped toy. He did not unwrap it. He weighed it in his hand, feeling the imbalance where paint had chipped away. He placed it back and locked the door. The next morning a directive arrived. Reassignment, temporary. He was to be moved farther from the family wing, closer to ceremonial access points, visible, harmless. The message included a line he had not seen before. No further independent assessments are required. Independent assessments had never been prohibited. They had simply never been acknowledged. The guard accepted the reassignment without protest. Resistance now would be premature. As he walked the new route surrounded by openness and light, he felt the absence more sharply than before. The palace functioned smoothly. Guests passed. Staff smiled. Nothing appeared wrong. Which meant the pattern was holding. And patterns like this, he knew, only existed when multiple people were choosing silence over correction. The child was being managed, not safeguarded. The distinction mattered. And soon, it would demand more than observation. The reassignment took effect immediately. The guard reported to ceremonial access at first light, a position defined by visibility rather than control. Wide corridors, high ceilings, predictable movement. It was where nothing unexpected was meant to happen. He accepted the change without comment. Compliance at this stage was not surrender, it was cover. The pressure arrived quietly. A revised protocol briefing replaced the usual morning exchange. Shorter, more precise, less room between instructions. The duty officer spoke without looking up. Any deviation from assigned zones now requires dual authorization. Verbal confirmation must be witnessed. Independent judgment is no longer sufficient. No one reacted. The guard noted the phrasing again. No longer sufficient implied it had once been acceptable. The line was being redrawn in retrospect. During the first hour of duty, a senior aide crossed his path twice, too often to be coincidence. Each time the aide paused just long enough to be seen, then continued without speaking. Presence as reminder. By midday, the guard's wrist unit flagged a formal note. Not an order, a concern. It referenced his earlier timing discrepancies, framed as efficiency issues. The language was careful, almost sympathetic. Extended pauses may create unnecessary attention, it read. We rely on uniformity. Uniformity was the word they used when they meant obedience without friction. He adjusted his stance slightly, enough to be observed correcting himself. The watchers needed reassurance as much as control. In the early afternoon, he was summoned to a side office off the main gallery. The room was spare desk, 2 chairs, no personal effects. The head of household security waited inside, jacket removed, sleeves rolled neatly to the forearm, a gesture of approachability. Sit, the man said. The guard did. We're under scrutiny, the man began. External and internal, that report has created sensitivities. The guard listened without interrupting. There is a belief, the man continued, choosing each word, that overprotection can become its own form of harm. Excess attention, excess movement. Children require stability. Yes, sir, the guard said. And stability requires trust in those appointed to provide it. The guard met his gaze. Trust is supported by verification. A pause, not hostile, calculating. Your instincts are sound, the man said. That's why you were placed where you were, but instincts must align with hierarchy. When they don't, damage occurs. Damage to whom? The guard asked. The man exhaled slowly, to everyone. When the meeting ended, nothing had been ordered, nothing had been threatened, but the boundary had been drawn clearly now. Any action taken outside protocol would be framed as personal failure, not institutional correction. Returning to his post, the guard noticed a subtle change in how others moved around him. Conversation stopped sooner. Glances lasted longer. He had become visible again, but in a different way. Late in the afternoon, a sealed envelope was delivered to the ceremonial desk. No return mark. Inside, a single page, a revised movement authorization bearing a familiar name, Camilla's. The authorization granted oversight privileges in areas previously restricted. The guard read it twice. The paper was clean, the ink fresh. The pressure was no longer abstract. It had found its instrument. And it was moving closer to the child. The guard returned the envelope to its sleeve and logged its receipt without comment. The authorization did not name him. It did not need to. Its presence alone altered the field. Oversight privileges carried weight even when unused, especially then. By evening, the palace adjusted around the document's existence. Access points responded more quickly to certain badges. Movement requests routed through different desks. Names appeared on screens where there had previously been none. Camilla's authority did not announce itself. It settled. The guard felt it during a routine handover. A junior officer hesitated before speaking, then deferred to someone not scheduled to be present. The chain of command bent subtly, accommodating a new axis. During the night sweep, the guard was reassigned again, this time closer to the inner corridors, but with restrictions layered thickly around him. He could see more and intervene less, a deliberate tension. He paused near the service stairwell, the same one where he had heard the counting days earlier. The door was sealed now. New lock, temporary plate, no fault registered. A voice spoke behind him. You won't find anything there. He turned. The head of household security stood a few paces back, hands folded, expression neutral. I wasn't looking, the guard replied. The man nodded. Good, because looking implies expectation, and expectations create problems. They stood together in silence, listening to the building. Somewhere above them, something moved, soft, contained, guided. She's within her rights, the man said at last. The authorization is valid. Authority and appropriateness aren't always aligned, the guard said. The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Be careful. I am, the guard replied. After the man left, the guard remained where he was, posture relaxed, attention sharp. He did not test the lock. Testing would have been noted. Instead, he traced the pattern forming around it. Seals appeared where movement had once flowed. Authority clustered where discretion had been encouraged. Later that night, he observed Camilla from a distance as she crossed a gallery with two aides. She moved confidently, unhurried. Not furtive. That was important. People acting improperly often rushed. She did not. She paused briefly near a doorway, exchanged a few quiet words with an unseen figure, then continued on. The exchange lasted seconds, enough to alter arrangements. The guard noted the time. Minutes later, a child movement window closed early, logged as completed. The guard felt the pressure then, not as fear but as narrowing, options reducing, paths closing, the system aligning against deviation. Back in the locker room, he found his locker open. Not forced, simply unlocked. Inside, everything was as he had left it, except the blue horse, now placed on top of his folded uniform, unwrapped. Clean, intact, returned again. A message without words. He closed the locker slowly, locking it this time with deliberate care. Someone wanted him to know he was seen. Someone wanted him to hesitate. Instead, he began preparing. He reviewed protocol in his head, line by line, identifying the spaces where interpretation still existed. Safeguarding clauses, emergency discretion. The language was narrow, but it was there. Protocol pressure worked by making those spaces feel smaller than they were. As he left the palace that night, he felt the weight of the decision forming, not as resolve but as inevitability. Authority had been misapplied. The child's pattern confirmed it. The authorization had formalized it. Soon, instinct and protocol would no longer coexist. One would have to be chosen. The guard adjusted his schedule without requesting approval, not enough to trigger a review, just enough to place him near the inner gallery at the hour Camilla preferred to move, late, when visibility was low and compliance was assumed. The palace air had cooled again. Evening light fell shallow through the tall windows, stretching shadows across the floor in long, deliberate lines. This was a transitional hour, staff turnover, attention diffused. He stood near a column, posture neutral, gaze unfixed, presence without challenge. Camilla entered the gallery accompanied by a single aide. No entourage, no display. She wore authority the way experienced figures did, quietly, as if it were structural rather than personal. The guard observed her path. She did not look at him. She did not need to. She stopped near a side door marked private access, authorized only. The door was not on his assigned zone, but it was within sight. She spoke briefly to the aide, who stepped away, leaving her alone. The guard waited. Counting was important. Interruption too early appeared aggressive, too late appeared complicit. She reached for the handle. "Ma'am," the guard said. His voice was calm, unraised, professional. Camilla turned slowly. Her expression registered mild surprise, quickly smoothed into appraisal. "Yes. That access point is restricted during this window." She glanced at the door, then back at him. "I have authorization." "I've seen the document," the guard said. "It grants oversight, not unsupervised movement." A pause. She studied him now openly, not angry, curious. "You're very precise," she said. "It's my function," he replied. She smiled faintly. "Then you'll know this is unnecessary." "Supervision protects all parties," the guard said, "including you." The smile faded, just enough to register. "I won't be supervised by someone outside my remit." The guard inclined his head. "Then this access should be scheduled formally." The gallery seemed to hold its breath. Footsteps echoed distantly, then faded. Camilla's tone cooled. "You're exceeding your discretion." "I'm exercising it," he replied. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You're interpreting patterns that don't concern you." "The child does," the guard said. Silence. For the first time, something flickered across her expression, calculation giving way to irritation. "You should be very careful," she said. "Safeguarding can become accusation if mishandled." The guard did not respond immediately. He shifted slightly, positioning himself between her and the door without making the movement explicit. "Then let it be handled correctly," he said. They stood there, authority meeting protocol, neither yielding yet. Somewhere nearby, a door closed softly. A child's voice counted once, then stopped. Camilla's eyes flicked past him toward the sound. That was enough. The confrontation had begun. Camilla exhaled slowly, as if steadying herself rather than conceding ground. She did not raise her voice. She did not step back. Instead, she shifted her weight, angling her body so the door remained within reach without being directly behind her. It was a practiced movement, someone used to rooms rearranging around them. "You're placing yourself in a difficult position," she said. "This matter has already been reviewed." "By whom?" the guard asked. "By those entitled to review it." The answer was circular by design. He let it stand. "Then allow me to document this access," he said, formally. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Documentation isn't required." "It is when discretion overrides routine," he replied. She held his gaze, measuring the cost of refusal. Around them the gallery remained empty. Too empty. The aide had not returned. The timing was deliberate. "You're assuming a risk that doesn't belong to you," she said. The guard tapped his wrist unit once, activating a passive log. No alert, no escalation, just a time stamp. He did not announce it. "The risk belongs to the child," he said. The words were quiet, factual. They were not an accusation. They did not need to be. Camilla's expression hardened. "You are not accusing me of impropriety." "I'm preventing the appearance of it," the guard said. Another pause, longer this time. From the corridor beyond the door came a soft sound, a chair shifting, fabric brushing against stone. Movement without freedom. Camilla glanced toward it again. The movement was instinctive, not calculated. The guard saw it. "You've read the report," she said suddenly. "No," the guard replied. "I've observed its effects." Her jaw tightened. Observation without context is dangerous. "So is context without observation," he said. She stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "You think you're protecting someone. What you're doing is destabilizing a solution." "A solution that requires concealment," he replied. Her eyes flashed. "A solution that prevents scandal." "Safeguarding isn't a scandal," the guard said. "It's a duty." The word duty landed differently. It was the language of the institution, not of morality. She recognized it. Behind them, footsteps approached, controlled, multiple, reinforcements or witnesses. Camilla straightened. "Very well," she said. "You may accompany me." The concession was tactical. Accompaniment limited her freedom but preserved appearance. The guard nodded once and stepped aside, allowing her to open the door under observation. The room beyond was smaller than expected, windowless, warm. A lamp cast soft light over a table set too neatly. The child sat on a chair, feet not quite touching the floor, hands folded tightly in their lap. No toy. The child looked up when the door opened, eyes flicking first to Camilla, then to the guard. The counting stopped. Camilla moved toward the child. The guard moved with her, maintaining distance, presence steady. "This won't take long," Camilla said to the child, voice softened deliberately. The guard noted the lack of other adults. No nanny, no tutor, no witness. "This space isn't logged," he said. Camilla turned sharply. "Enough." "Then we stop," the guard replied. The approaching footsteps reached the doorway. The head of household security appeared, followed by two senior officers. The room filled with controlled authority. "What's going on?" the man asked. The guard met his gaze. "An unauthorized private interaction," he said evenly, "with a vulnerable minor." Silence. Camilla did not speak. For the first time since the report had surfaced, the pattern broke. And it broke in front of witnesses. The room did not react immediately. Authority rarely did. It assessed first. The head of household security stood just inside the doorway, taking in the arrangement without comment. The child seated, Camilla standing too close, the guard positioned deliberately between them and the exit. The two senior officers remained behind him, their presence widening the space without entering it. "This area isn't scheduled for use," the head of security said at last. "No," the guard replied, "it is." Camilla turned slightly, aligning herself with the head of security rather than the guard. "This is being handled," she said, discreetly. "Discretion doesn't override safeguarding," the guard said, voice even. The child shifted on the chair. The movement was small, but it drew the guard's attention immediately. He adjusted his stance by a fraction, enough to block Camilla's direct line without appearing confrontational. The head of security noticed. "Officer," he said carefully, "step back." The guard did not move. "The child should not be alone in an unlogged space," he said, "not with oversight authority acting independently." Camilla's expression hardened. "You're mischaracterizing this." "I'm describing it," the guard replied. The silence that followed was heavier than before. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a choice point. The head of security took a step forward, lowering his voice. "If you persist, this becomes a breach." "Yes," the guard said, "a protective one." One of the senior officers inhaled sharply. The word had weight. Protective breach was a term used sparingly, reserved for imminent risk when protocol failed to account for vulnerability. "Risk has not been established," the head of security said. "It has," the guard replied, "through concealment, through altered patterns, through isolation." He did not raise his voice. He did not gesture. He simply remained where he was. The child looked up at him, not frightened, expectant. Camilla spoke again, sharper now. "This is not your decision to make." "It is when no one else will," the guard said. The head of security closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. When he spoke again, the tone had changed. "Officer, if you proceed, you accept full responsibility." "Yes," the guard said. He reached up and activated his wrist unit, not the log but the safeguard channel. A rarely used function. Manual. It bypassed discretionary oversight and routed directly to independent child protection review. The unit vibrated once in confirmation. Camilla took a step back. "You're making a serious mistake." The guard did not respond. He crouched slightly, bringing himself to the child's eye level without touching them. "We're going to move," he said quietly. "You'll walk with me." The child nodded once, no hesitation. That, more than anything else, shifted the room. The guard stood and extended his arm, not to lead, but to guide. The child rose and stepped beside him, close but not clinging. The guard felt the slight tremor through the air, the residual tension of someone who had been holding themselves still for too long. "No," Camilla said. The head of security raised a hand, stopping her. "Enough." They watched as the guard escorted the child toward the door. No resistance, no force, just motion. As they passed the threshold, alarms did not sound. Locks did not engage. But something else did. The palace systems began to respond, not with noise but with record. Time stamps appeared. Access points updated. Oversight shifted outward. The guard felt it as a change in pressure, like a door opening somewhere deep in the structure. Behind him, Camilla's voice was controlled but tight. "This won't end here." The guard did not turn around. He guided the child into the corridor, choosing the longest route, the one with witnesses, light, and no shadows. Because once the breach was made, it had to be irreversible. The corridor accepted them without resistance. Lights remained steady. Doors responded normally. The palace did not protest the movement, which meant the system had already recalculated the risk and chosen documentation over obstruction. The guard kept his pace even, neither hurried nor slow. The child matched him instinctively, steps short but determined. He did not look down. Looking down would have suggested reassurance. What the child needed now was certainty. Behind them, voices followed at a controlled distance. The head of household security issued quiet instructions, redirecting staff without drawing attention. The two senior officers flanked the rear, not to restrain the guard, but to contain the consequences. As they reached the central junction, a red indicator illuminated briefly on the wall console. The safeguard channel had been acknowledged. External review was now active. The guard felt the weight of that acknowledgement settle. There would be no quiet resolution after this, no internal smoothing. The record would extend beyond the palace. He guided the child into the designated secure lounge, a neutral space designed for transitions. Soft light, open sightlines, 2 exits, the door remained open. A child protection officer arrived within minutes, summoned automatically by the safeguard trigger. Civilian, neutral attire, independent badge. The officer assessed the child first, crouching to their level, speaking softly without urgency. The guard stepped back, maintaining presence without interference. The head of household security joined him at the threshold. "You understand what you've done," the man said quietly. "Yes," the guard replied. "There will be inquiries." "Yes." "You may be suspended." "Yes." The man studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "You acted within the letter of the safeguard clause," he said. "Barely." The guard said nothing. Barely was enough. Camilla did not appear. Her absence was noted by everyone. As procedures took over, the guard felt the shift from action to aftermath. The palace resumed its rhythms, but something fundamental had changed. The pattern had been disrupted, the silence broken. The child remained in the secure lounge, calm now. The blue horse returned to their hands by the protection officer. The child's thumb resumed its familiar motion along the chipped paint. The guard watched from a distance, making no move to approach. His role was complete for now. Later, alone in the locker room, he removed his uniform methodically. Each piece folded, placed. His wrist unit vibrated one last time. Protective breach recorded, review pending. He acknowledged it. As he left the palace, the night air felt colder than before, not hostile, honest. He did not know what consequences awaited him. He only knew that the child would sleep in a space that was logged, supervised, and visible. That knowledge was sufficient. For now, the review began before dawn, not formally, no summons, no panel, but through absence. The guard reported as scheduled and was met by an access denial at the staff gate. Polite, silent, no explanation offered. His wrist unit displayed a neutral status, administrative hold. He acknowledged it and stepped aside, letting others pass. The palace continued to function. That was the point, removal without disruption. By mid-morning, he was escorted to a temporary office on the outer ring. Not disciplinary. Not yet. The room was brighter than the interior spaces, windows uncovered, the light unfiltered, transparency as atmosphere. An independent reviewer arrived shortly after. Civilian attire, government credential, no palace insignia. She did not shake his hand. "Walk me through your decision," she said, activating a recorder placed openly on the table. The guard spoke without emphasis. Timings, patterns, omitted logs, the sealed room, the absence of routine witnesses. He did not speculate on intent. He described actions and effects. When he finished, the reviewer did not respond immediately. She replayed a segment of the recording, listening to his own voice repeat the phrase protective breach. "You understand," she said finally, "that authority misuse is difficult to prove without explicit harm." "Yes," the guard replied. "And that reputational risk often outweighs circumstantial concern." "Yes." She studied him. Why proceed? He considered the question carefully. "Because concealment had become the operating condition," he said. "Safeguarding cannot function without visibility." The reviewer nodded once. "That aligns with the clause." She closed the file. "You'll remain on hold pending cross-confirmation." "Understood." While the review continued elsewhere, the guard waited. Hours passed without update. He did not pace. He did not check his unit. Waiting was part of the process. Late afternoon brought movement, not toward him but around him. He observed staff entering and exiting the adjacent office, files transferred, devices scanned. The building was auditing itself. A familiar figure appeared briefly through the glass, the head of household security. He did not enter. He paused, met the guard's eyes, and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. That was all. Near evening, the independent reviewer returned. Her posture had changed, less neutral, more precise. "The records you triggered," she said, "filled several gaps." She slid a tablet across the table. On it, a timeline reconstructed from residual data, access points, environmental controls, partial camera feeds restored from backups no one expected to be checked. Movement without log, rooms used without schedule, authority applied without witness. The pattern, once abstract, was now visible. "The child has been reassigned to an external safeguarding framework," the reviewer continued, "effective immediately." The guard absorbed that. External meant independent. It meant distance from internal influence. "And Camilla?" he asked. The reviewer did not answer directly. "Oversight privileges have been suspended pending inquiry." That was more than he had expected. As he left the office, his wrist unit reactivated. Status changed from administrative hold to restricted active. Not full clearance, not removal. In the outer corridor, he passed a junior officer who straightened reflexively, then relaxed when the guard inclined his head. Respect had shifted, quietly. The palace that evening felt different, not calmer, exposed. Systems hummed more audibly. Lights held steady. Nothing was hidden now, not yet. The guard stepped outside into the cooling air, aware that this chapter was closing. The record had been restored, which meant the consequences were no longer his alone. The formal findings were not delivered to him. They never were. Outcomes moved through channels designed to diffuse responsibility and preserve continuity. What reached him came indirectly, in fragments that aligned too neatly to be coincidence. His duty roster updated first. Not a full reinstatement, but a return to operational corridors, limited scope, supervised rotation. The palace had decided he was still useful if contained. The guard accepted the assignment without comment. On his first evening back, he walked the west corridor again. The camera light above the archway was on, steady, logged. He stopped beneath it long enough for the system to register his presence, then moved on. Further down, the service stairwell door had been removed entirely, replaced by an open frame. Temporary barriers had given way to transparency. People passed through openly now, escorted, recorded. He did not linger. In the secure lounge, now repurposed for general use, the air felt different, neutral, unclaimed. The space no longer held tension. The child was gone, transferred earlier that day. No announcement had marked the departure. Only the absence remained. He noticed the drawing alcove had been restored. The clean rectangle on the wood was gone, replaced by a new piece of paper, blank, waiting. Staff moved more carefully around him now, not with fear but with awareness. Conversations did not stop when he approached. They adjusted. The palace had learned something, though it would never admit it. Near the end of his shift, the head of household security approached him in the central gallery. No aides, no formality. "You forced a recalibration," the man said quietly. "Yes, sir," the guard replied. "It cost us." "Yes." The man nodded. "It also corrected us." They stood in silence, watching the last of the evening light fade from the marble floor. "You won't advance from this," the man said. "You understand that?" "Yes." "Then why accept it?" The guard considered. "Because advancement wasn't the objective." The man studied him for a moment longer, then turned away. Later, alone, the guard opened his locker. Inside, everything was as he had left it. The blue horse was gone. In its place lay a folded note. No seal, no signature. Thank you for staying where it was visible. He read it once, then folded it and placed it back. When his shift ended, he exited through the staff gate as usual. The palace behind him was unchanged in silhouette, unchanged in authority. But inside, records now existed where silence once had. The guard walked into the night, posture steady, role intact. He did not feel triumph. He did not feel loss. Only the quiet weight of having prevented something that would never appear in any official history. And the knowledge that sometimes protection meant ensuring a truth could not be hidden again.